There is a kind of grief that does not stay where you put it. It follows you. It gets into your music, your hands, the way you walk. It makes the trees lean in. This is a story about that kind of grief, and about what happens when love refuses to accept what death has decided. Orpheus was the greatest musician the world had ever known. That is not a boast, it is the premise on which the entire story rests, and without understanding it fully, the rest makes no sense. He was the son of Apollo and a muse, which meant music was not something he had learned. It was something he was made of. When he played the lyre, rivers slowed down to listen. Stones rolled toward the sound. Wild animals settled at his feet and forgot, for a moment, what they were. The trees uprooted themselves gently, quietly, and moved closer. This is important. His music did not simply please. It compelled. It rearranged the priorities of everything that heard it. He fell in love with a woman named Eurydice. The myths do not spend much time on their courtship, which is itself a kind of tenderness, as if the love between them was so complete and self-evident that to describe its beginning would be to diminish it. They were together. They were happy. On the day they were married, the omens were not good. The wedding torch smoked and would not burn cleanly, which the Greeks understood as a sign. Something was already wrong with this happiness. Shortly after the wedding, Eurydice was walking through a meadow when she was bitten by a serpent in the grass. She died quickly, before anyone could reach her, and her soul descended to the underworld, as all souls must, into the domain of Hades. Orpheus was left alone with his lyre, and the particular silence of a house where someone is no longer. He did what he always did when the feeling was too large for words. He played. But this time the music was different. This time it held something that music is not usually asked to hold, not joy, not longing in the abstract, but the specific, precise weight of one person being gone from the world. The trees still moved toward it, but now they moved the way mourners move. The rivers still slowed, but now they slowed out of sorrow. And Orpheus made a decision that no mortal had made before him. He would go after her. He descended into the underworld alive. There is no explanation given for how he found the entrance, which suggests that grief itself is a kind of map, that those who mourn deeply enough somehow know which way is down. He crossed the river Styx, past the ferryman Charon who takes only the dead, and into the dark passages of Hades. He walked through the halls where souls drifted like smoke, past the fields of the dead, toward the throne of Hades and Persephone. And then he played. He played for the king and queen of the underworld, the two most implacable figures in all of Greek mythology, the ones who had never reversed a death, who had never returned what they had taken, who were in fact the definition of finality. He stood before their black iron thrones and he played the one song that contained everything he felt. The loss, the specific shape of Eurydice, the way a room changes when a particular person will never be in it again, the unbearability of continuing. The myths say that the shades of the dead stopped moving and gathered to listen, that the Furies wept, which they had never done, that Tantalus, condemned forever to reach for water and fruit that eternally recede, stopped reaching and simply stood still in the sound. And Persephone, who had herself been taken from the world above and knew something about loss, began to weep. Hades granted the request. Eurydice would be returned to the living world. There was one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her out of the underworld. She would follow behind him, and he must not look back, not once, not until both of them had crossed back into the light of the living world. If he turned before that moment, she would return to the dead, and no second appeal would be heard. The condition sounds simple. Anyone would agree to it. Anyone would be confident they could manage it. Orpheus set out. Eurydice followed behind him in the dark. What the myths understand and what makes this story unbearable is that the instruction was not a cruelty. It was a mercy, a test, yes, but a fair one. All he had to do was trust. Trust that she was there. Trust that love did not require proof. Trust that the sound of her footsteps in the dark was enough. He could hear her behind him, or he thought he could. The underworld is not a quiet place, and doubt is not a quiet feeling, and the further they walked the more the two sounds became confused. What if she was not there? What if Hades had deceived him? What if her footsteps had faded and he was walking out alone and the whole thing had been a trick, and he would emerge into the light to find himself still alone and now with no recourse, no second song, nothing left to play? He was almost at the threshold. The light was ahead of him, he could see it, the pale blur of the living world waiting at the tunnel's end. A few more steps and they would both be through. He turned. She was there. She was right behind him. He saw her face in that last moment, and her face, the ancient sources say, held no reproach, only sorrow, the sorrow of someone watching something end that did not have to end. She said his name, and then she was gone, drawn back into the dark, receding, her hand reaching toward him as she shrank, her voice disappearing the way voices disappear when a door closes between you and the person speaking. Hades had warned him there would be no second chance. Orpheus emerged from the underworld alone. He wandered after that through Thrace, through the hills above the rivers where he had once played to admiring trees and slowing water. He played still, but now the music had a different quality, not grief moving towards something, but grief that had nowhere left to go. He refused other loves. He refused consolation. He carried what had happened the way you carry something you do not put down because putting it down would mean it was over. He was eventually killed, torn apart by a group of women in Thrace, for reasons the different myths give differently. But even after his death, something continued. His head, cast into the river Hebrus, floated out to sea, still singing, still saying her name. The lyre was placed among the stars. It is there still, the constellation Lyra, a small bright cluster in the summer sky, just above the horizon where the light fades. Some say the song it carries is a lament. Some say it is something else, not grieving exactly, but the sound of having loved fully and lost completely and chosen, even with the knowledge of the outcome, to go back into the dark for the chance to see her face again. That is not a failure. That is the most human thing in all of Greek mythology. He turned because he loved her more than he trusted anything, even silence, even the dark, even the instruction of gods. And she was there. And then she wasn't. And that is all.